Hi, I'm Dr. John McClanahan. I'd like to welcome everyone to our four-part series dealing with tools for staying sober, or as I like to look at it, is Now What Do I Do? Thank you and enjoy. I am a addictions counselor in Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm also a grateful recovering alcoholic. And I will mention that from time to time as we go through some of these examples. What we're going to do today over the next couple of hours is do a couple segments that's kind of a follow-up for something we did a few months ago. We did a couple of presentations that I call Is I Is or Is I Ain't. And basically it's how do I know if I have a problem, or how do I know if a loved one has a problem. And we went through the various stages and segments of that. Also provided an online assessment tool to give people an opportunity to check where they may be if in any of this, if at all. I wanted to do a follow-up with that I call Now What Do I Do, which basically is tools for staying sober. What do I do if I find out I have a problem? And over the next couple of segments, what we're going to take a look at is some various options for treatment. We're going to take a look at cost and length of time and that type of thing. Give you some alternatives. The reason I think that's so critical, I want to start off with a couple of stories. And I've been doing this for a long, long time. And one of the things that I had as a job, or part of my job years ago, was doing intervention training with families and loved ones. And I always laugh about I did it long before it was fashionable and people had TV shows and that type of thing to show the ins and outs of this. One of the biggest problems, and nothing's changed, some of my good friends do intervention work full time and do excellent work with it. And this is one aspect that I still hear them talk about that, again, hasn't changed in decades. One of the biggest problems people run into is, okay, I admit I have a problem, now what do you want me to do? So again, it's kind of, where do I go? When I first was coming into recovery, a lot of people in my life were concerned, and I went through the same routines that a lot of people do. That when I finally said, yes, it's a problem, now what do you want me to do? Very often I would hear, and I would hear it with families with the intervention training. Well, we don't know, but go figure it out. Well, if I could have figured it out, there's a good possibility I'd already be doing that. Well, again, in intervention training years ago, what we would do, and like I said, it's not a whole lot different now, we would get family members, concerned folks that wanted to get involved, maybe other family members, neighbors, co-workers, anybody that might have a little bit of input in this. And excuse me, what they would do is we would do an initial session that would start off with why you think this person has a problem. And then they make a list of all the events that they were going to present to the person. And then we would do some dress rehearsals because, again, an intervention, as clinical as it can be, is like putting on a play. Used to always tell folks that the more homework you do, the better chance you have of having a positive outcome, because an intervention on a good day is like an orchestrated crapshoot, and the more you have, the better chance you have of it working. Well, almost 90% of the time, right at the 11th hour, people would get ready to do this. They'd go in and they'd confront their loved one, and you need to do something or else. And then there would be, this, and this is going to happen. And they would forget that you need to do this. So now you've got the person right where you want them, and you've got no treatment option, no alternative. People, if you ever watch any of the TV shows that are on that deal with intervention, I think sometimes because of the way the shows are laid out and editing and that kind of thing, people think that it's kind of a slam bang. They came in, they filmed an hour. There was days and days and days of preparation with the family members. Everything is already prearranged. It's like booking a cruise. It's like booking a vacation. Everything is already in place. So when mom or dad or junior or whoever says, okay, what do you want me to do? Here's your bag, here we go. Very often what these shows will show is the down and dirty and the chair throwing and all the stuff. And at the very end, there's Dad with his suitcase at the airport and he's got a ticket going to treatment. Well, somebody wasn't in the background while the show was being filmed calling, going, I hope I can find somewhere. That's all been prearranged. So very often when a person decides they need to do something, coming up with what's available can be a real stuck point for people. So again, that's why I call this Now What Do I Do? Over the course of the next couple of hours, we're going to take a look at some options, and I like to do this. I do a variation of this in my own groups that I do, where I look at external tools for staying sober and internal tools. External tools are really kind of what I like to look at as mechanical things for staying sober, things a person has to go do or have other people involved. Inpatient treatment, going to rehab, outpatient, going to meetings, maybe going back to church, medications, things like that. Things that somebody else has a hand in this. Then there's also internal tools, where this is more attitude change, more philosophy change, ways of looking at things like being patient, and that type of thing, and we'll get into that in the last segment. So again, we're going to look at external tools versus internal tools. Again, I'd mentioned some of the options that we're going to look at. There's inpatient treatment, and there's various lengths of stay for that now. Outpatient treatment, there's a lot of variations for that. There's 12-step meetings, AA, NA, CDA, Al-Anon, all the above. Certain medications, like I said. So these are all things that we're going to take a look at that are options when somebody says, now what do I do? Or this is what we want you to do. I want to spend most of the time, and this is just a little brief introduction to these segments. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the one that I think is the most critical of all. Some of these take some work and take some involvement. Some take a second or two to do, that type of thing. The most critical one, and all of them, whatever a person chooses, has to start with this one basic philosophy. And it's one of those things that sounds too simple. Addicts are notorious for taking advice or asking for advice, taking that advice, putting our own spin on it, messing it all up, and then blaming everybody for giving us really bad advice. The biggest thing that we have to deal with is we have to do this just for today. Regardless of what a person picks as their technique, or I'm a firm believer in mix and match, a lot of things to kind of experience everything that's out there. When I do a variation of this, like I said, in some of the treatment groups that I do, and even in the education groups, I like to look at tools for staying sober where I basically set the table. This is what's available. You choose what you need, and if you want more, you certainly can do that. I heard a guy in a meeting years ago had mentioned his take on AA as an example was like the old cafeteria style restaurants where you'd walk in and there'd be 10 entrees and 50 desserts and that kind of thing. You don't grab one of everything. You take what you want. And if you're still hungry, you go back and get more. So to me, treatment on any level is like that. You find what works best for you. I'm a firm believer that sobriety is kind of like water. Water seeks its own level, and you're going to find what works best. Regardless of what you pick, it all starts with this one here, just for today. The reason that is such a critical thing, addiction is a compulsive illness. The compulsive person wants what I want when I want it, and that's right now. So it's hurry up and hurry up and hurry up. We've mentioned before in another tape that there's two words in the addict's vocabulary that he or she hates to hear. One is no, and worse than that is the word wait. When somebody says, how long is this going to happen? Just wait, it's going to happen. Very impatient, comes with the territory. Too many people look at the big picture, and it's not that we shouldn't have a desire to say, I want to stay sober the rest of my life. But unfortunately, if that's your focus, we get wrapped around the axle because most people don't have a concept or a clue what forever means. As an example, I certainly hope I stay sober the rest of my life. But if somebody says, and you need to stay sober, you better stay sober the rest of your life, I've got no concept of what forever means. Unless I've just dropped dead right here, I got no idea what forever is all about. If somebody says, can you handle today? I got a pretty good idea what 24 hours is. I've got a frame of reference for that. I've lived a lot of those. So I have a pretty good idea of just for today. I used to use as an example in the education groups, if somebody says, I have to stay sober the rest of my life, I would tell them, just to give you an idea what you're up against, and barring any other intervention or illnesses, average life expectancy, and I'll update it a little bit, average life expectancy for men today is high 70s, low 80s. For women, it's 90 and a little above. You read a lot of stories and studies over the last couple of years that in the near future, we could be looking at lifespans of 100 years old. So if you want to know what a forever is all about, and again, nothing intervenes and you live out your lifespan, that's how long I would tell people. Now what I want you to do is take one of those numbers, subtract how old you are, and that's forever. That's how long you have to stay sober. A lot of people look at that and go, oh my God, I can't do that. I've got a friend of mine that does adolescent work, and he said that's one of the biggest problems they run into in treatment. You'll have a 14-year-old young woman who's being told, you got to stay sober, got to stay clean the rest of your life. And she starts thinking, okay, everybody in my family lives to be 112. I'm 14. Oh my God, I can't do this. Two things happen. Either they adopt the attitude of, I can't do this, why try? Or sometimes even worse is, well, I'm 14 and everybody lives to be 112 and I'll just get sober when I'm 100. I'll just wait until, because we don't have a concept of what forever means. If somebody says, just for today, can I do it for right now? This is the greatest tool for staying sober. Not only is where it all starts, it takes 2 seconds every day. First thing in the morning when you wake up, just not today. My sponsor years ago used to tell me, and you have to be careful when you say this or hear this. If you want to drink as bad tomorrow as you want to right now, go ahead. And that's kind of a play on the old mind game of tomorrow never comes. If you want it as bad tomorrow as you want to right now, be my guest. Okay? It's about today. Okay? There's a scene, some of you might have seen the movie Clean and Sober, that was out years and years ago with Michael Keaton. Plays an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. And he finally ends up in rehab, and he goes for all, and I'm going to use him as an example in another segment when we talk about finding a sponsor, because there's a scene in there that's absolutely, just textbook how not to do it. But it's a great scene. Well, anyway, he ends up in rehab, and he's there because he's hiding from the law at Sanctuary. He's got himself into all kinds of dilemmas as a result of his use, and he goes into treatment. Well, Morgan Freeman plays his counselor, and I love it. His name's Craig in the movie, and he's this smash mouth, up in your face, recovering heroin addict. Just what Michael Keaton needs and exactly what he doesn't want. Well, he goes out on a 24-hour pass, comes back in, and Morgan Freeman asks him, well, how was your day? Oh, it was great. And he pulls out of his pocket, a urine sample bottle and hands it to him. He says, show me how great it was. Well, not to be too graphic, but they're standing in the bathroom at the stalls and they're talking to each other. And Morgan Freeman says, you don't have a clue about any of this, do you? And Michael Keaton says, well, I think I've got an idea. And he said, do you know how long you've been sober? And he kind of makes, a shrug kind of thing. And Morgan Freeman says, I can tell you, you've been sober 14 days, 22 hours, 15 minutes, 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds. He said, that's how we do this thing. It's a day at a time. Sometimes it's a minute at a time. Don't look at the big picture. You'll get out of here when you get out of here type of thing. So it's all about just for today. We have a couple of little reminders that kind of fall into the just for today category. I want to talk to you about a few of those. Some of them you might know. One's a very simple thing. It's a little book that a lot of us use. It's called the 24-Hour-a-Day book. And it's a little black pocket book that literally it's about 2.5, 3 inches by 4 or 5 inches. Very small, very powerful book. And it's got 365 pages in it, and it's one for each day of the year. It's divided into 3 segments. There's a thought for the day, a meditation for the day, and a prayer for the day. And what I love about that little book, it takes about 2 minutes to read it. So again, like I said, some of these things might be a little more complex. Some are very simple. You don't have to devote hours and hours of study to it. You can fit it into your day anywhere. A lot of us like to do it first thing in the morning. I'll tell you a little story about that in a minute too. The thing that I love about it is each segment can stand alone. Person very often early in recovery might look and say, well, the thought for the day, I can do this. This meditation for the day, I don't know about that. The prayer for the day, I'm not ready for that. Okay. You can tease out each segment and it'll stand by itself. Again, it's more effective if you do the whole thing. At the end of the thought for the day, there's a question. And it pertains to the paragraph that precedes it. And it talks about, am I experiencing resentment? Am I, envying other people's recovery? Whatever the topic might be. And it gives you a chance to kind of reflect. A lot of people will go back and read it a second time at the end of the day to look back and did I suffer from resentment today and that. So it's a nice little guide type of thing. It's still very inexpensive as treatment options go. When I bought mine, it was $3.95. It's not a whole lot more now, but all you have to do is kind of do the math. It's 365 pages. It was $3.95. It was a little more than a penny a page. And I looked at that and thought, I certainly drank more than that a day. I can spend a penny a day. I'll never forget when I first bought mine. You can buy them now. A lot of bookstores in the self-help sections and that kind of thing have those types of literature available. But for years, they were only available at meetings. And after a meeting, first couple days I was sober, go to this one particular meeting that had a little literature stand in the back. And I go to buy this, and I hand the guy my $4, and he hands me the book, and he says, son, he said, that's going to be the best $4 you ever invested. And part of me was, well, that's nice, but part of me, I'm walking away because I'm new and skeptical. It's like, well, of course you're going to tell me that. I wouldn't expect him to say, here's your book, give me the $4. This is the biggest piece of junk ever written, but thanks for your money. He was absolutely right. One of the greatest tools we have. It's very simple, it's very quick. Some of you know this story, and any chance I get to use my grandson in a story, in a situation, I will. A number of years ago, he's almost 7 now. A number of years ago, he was about 3. And on Fridays, I would watch him. I was off on Fridays. And I would watch him, and it was kind of Granddaddy's day, and we'd go feed the ducks and down the river or whatever. Well, this one particular morning, he's got to go to the bathroom, and not to get real graphic about it, but he goes in. I said, you need any help? No, I'm fine. And he's in there, and he's in there, and he's in there. And I said, you all right, buddy? Oh, I'm fine. A couple more minutes pass, and I'm thinking, are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. And I decided, I was getting a little concerned. I pushed the bathroom door to the side. I said, are you okay? He said, I'm fine. Well, this is what I saw. He's sitting there with my 24-hour-a-day book in his hand. He's got my glasses on, and he's got them down on his nose like this. And I said, what are you doing? He said, look, Granddaddy, I'm you. And I thought, it has a lot of impact on a lot of people. It is the best $4 I ever spent. So again, we talk about just for today. It's where it starts. And the good thing about it is, yes, we have to focus on, dealing with, the rest of my life. Thankfully, we can do it a day at a time. I've got a lot of work that I still need to do over the years, but I've got the rest of my life to do it. I'm not getting myself all tied up in, oh my God, I hope I'm sober in 6 months because I've got a wedding to go to, or I've got all this. I'm a firm believer, Father Martin used to talk about this all the time. If you take care of today, there's good possibility you just bought tomorrow's sobriety. If you do today what you did yesterday, it's a good chance you'll get through today. If you do tomorrow what you're doing right now, there's a real good chance you'll get one more day. We don't have to project. We can't project that far into the future. Yes, we keep our eye on the prize, and that's where but if you don't focus on today, you don't have to worry about what's going to happen next, because we've already set the negative of that into motion. So it's all about just for today. It's as simple as that, and it can be as difficult as that. Addiction for years we've talked about as being the I'll quit tomorrow disease. I can't tell you how many times, and probably some of you, I'd wake up and today's the day. I quit. And then 2 hours later, well, that's long enough. Or who's looking, or whatever. Getting that first day can be one of the most difficult things to do. Because again, we all get a better offer. I'll quit tomorrow, like I said. I use as an example, and some of you can probably relate to this, and I'm a victim of this as well. I've never met anybody in my life that on a Tuesday morning woke up and said, you know what, I don't look as good as I used to. I need to go on a diet. I'll start right now. Most people, it's I need to go on a diet. Come Monday, that's when it's always, or it's getting close to the holidays. I'll just wait till January, it'll be my New Year's resolution. And it could be March, and it doesn't matter. Always put it off. So just today, again, it's as easy as that, and it can be as difficult as that. Another little thing that we use to remind us of just today, and also reminds us to stay focused, that recovery is an ongoing thing. A lot of us, if you go to meetings, go to AA meetings, you get a chip. You get a token, a reminder of your length of sobriety. You go to NA meetings and you get a little key fob, key tag that has length of sobriety on it. And a lot of other groups do other things, but it's kind of that reminder. So a lot of us keep our current chips in our pocket and keep them close to us where we can kind of have that reminder. I used to keep all my chips in a separate little wallet that I had, and honestly, it got to where it was getting a little heavy, and the wallet was getting worn out. And people used to ask me, "Why do you carry those around with you all the time? Why don't you just keep the current one?" And I would tell people that, I keep them in a very special place, because if I get ready to take a drink, they're right there, and they'll kick me right in the rear to remind me of where I came from and where I could be headed if I choose poorly. So again, it's kind of a corny thing, but one of the things that I love, telling a little story about a guy I met in a meeting a number of years ago, that's kind of that just for today, just a reminder. It was a meeting that I went to every Sunday morning years before we moved to this area here. And it was a Sunday morning breakfast meeting, and my daughters used to love going with me to that meeting. I have twin daughters that are 31 now, but when they were little, they loved going to that meeting. And I thought it was just because they were supporting Daddy, and it was nice, but I found out later on it's because they had great donuts, and they could have cared less about what was going on, but the donuts were good. Well, anyway, this meeting was a speakers meeting, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that means if you're not familiar with kind of the 12-step layout. But this meeting was a huge meeting, and they held it in a rec center in town. and it was in the middle of this really nice park. And very often there'd be 200 people at this meeting. It was huge. And if you didn't get there early, you didn't get a seat. And that wasn't really all that bad, because when the weather was nice, people would sit at the picnic tables and the benches outside, and they would take speakers. And I had to be real careful, because I said this one time. I said that when it was crowded and it was nice out, they'd take speakers and hang them up outside. And somebody thought, damn, that's pretty brutal to do. And it's like, not the person, not the people. Audio space, it's like, oh. So you could sit outside and listen to the meeting. Well, there was a guy that was there. His name was Chad, and I'll always remember him. He had been sober since the dawn of time, or at least I thought so when I first came in. And he had a very peculiar habit at the end of every meeting. He would pick a newcomer, and he would signal to him to come over to him. And I thought, well, that's a nice thing. He's just greeting new people coming in. And he'd go through this routine. He'd ask the new person to hold out their hand. And of course, they very dutifully would do it. And he'd take his hand, ball it up in a fist, drop it into their hand, fold their hand into a fist, pat it a couple of times, give them kind of the finger wag and say something to them and walk away. Well, I watched that for week after week after week. And I'd been sober at this point a couple of years. And I know we're supposed to check our egos and that kind of thing, but after a while, I started to think to myself, where's mine? I've been coming to this meeting for a long time. I never got that. Didn't know what that was. Didn't care what that was. Where's mine? I thought at that point it could have been a huge, just an old used Kleenex, and he's telling the new person to throw my trash away, but I wanted it. Well, months go by, nothing. And one day, I'm standing there talking to somebody after the meeting, and I see Chad look over at me, and he does this. And I looked over my shoulder thinking there's got to be something, because it can't be me. And I kind of ignored him, and he does this. Me? Yeah, you. Well, I tried to be as nonchalant as I could and walked over slow, but actually I'm like a kid at Christmas. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get mine, and I'm all excited. And he says, John, he said, I owe you an apology. He said, I've been doing this for years, and I realized I've never done this for you. And of course, it's like, I've done what? I don't know what you're talking about. What? He goes, you've probably seen me talking to new people and giving them something. Yeah, I kind of noticed it. In the back of my mind, it's like, yeah, and what took you so long? He said, well, I want to do this for you. And I said, okay. Hold out your hand. And I'm trying to not shake. I'm trying to be all calm about it. And he said, now, this is very important. Took his hand, balled it up in a fist, dropped something in my hand, balled it back up, patted it a couple of times, and said, this is important, and walked away. And I'm trying not to be too anxious about it, so I'm just being cool about it. I'm not going to look just yet. Well, finally, I opened my hand, and it wasn't a used Kleenex. It wasn't a gum wrapper. And I look in my hand, and all I can think of, some of you are old enough to remember, the Charlie Brown Halloween special, where all he gets is a rock. Well, I open up my hand, and I've got this rock. And I look at it, and I think, Chad's been sober forever. This is what you get from years of sobriety. He's nuts. He gave me a rock. And I'm trying again to be cool about it. And finally, I said, Chad, come here a minute. And he goes, well, I said, come here a minute. I got a question for you. Well, he comes back over and I said, what's the matter? I said, I got a question for you. I said, what is this? He said, it's a rock. And I thought, now I know he's nuts. I said, yeah, and it's a pretty one too. What is it? He said, you don't know? I said, no, sir, I don't have a clue. He said, it's a sober stone. I said, oh. I said, that sounds, what do I do with it? And he just kind of shook his head like, you rookies. He said, it's very simple. You take this stone, you have the urge to drink. Put this in your mouth, and if it melts, you can have one. And he walked away. And I thought, wow. I had a guy in group years ago ask me, was it this big when he first gave it to you? I said, no, but it's a lot shinier than it used to be. It's just another little reminder. It all starts with just today. Don't worry about what's coming next. Don't worry about, that'll take care of itself if you handle now. Like I said, if you do today what you did yesterday, you got a pretty good chance of taking care of right now. If you do tomorrow what you're doing right now, it's a good chance you might buy another day. It's when we focus in the long haul and looking at the future, we can get ourselves all tied up in this. It really is, again, kind of like speaking a foreign language because, again, I want what I want when I want it, and that's now. I had a patient a number of years ago who'd been in and out of inpatient a number of times, in and out of outpatient a number of times. She was a physician, was an anesthesiologist. And she came to me one day before a group and she said, I finally started to realize I'm overthinking the problem. And I said, well, yeah, we've talked about it. It's called intellectualization. It can be a killer. She said, it finally dawned on me that I can't cram a lifetime of sobriety into 2 weeks. And I thought, wow, how profound is that? Exactly. We handle what we have as we have it. You project too far in the future, you're going to lose your primary focus, and that's just today. That's all we have to focus on. What we're going to do, we're going to take a couple-minute break. Like I said, this was a short introduction to what we're going to look at. And then we'll actually get into taking a look at some of these various ways that we can handle this. So be back in a few and see you real soon.